June 4th, 1942. 10:52 a.m. Japanese carrier Hiryu, 150 miles northwest of Midway. Lieutenant Mio Kobayashi's hand shook as he marked positions on his chart, pencil hovering over numbers that made no sense. Out the ready room porthole, Admiral Yamaguchi Tanman stared at reconnaissance photos, his face frozen in disbelief. Not anger, not confusion. More like the cold shock of realizing something so basic had gone wrong, and there was no fixing it. Impossible. We saw her go down in the Coral Sea. Burning, listing, abandoned. But here in black and white, a photo showed an American carrier launching planes. Her island structure plane as day, even in the blurry shot. 3 carriers. The Americans had 3 at Midway, not 2. Just like that, the math was broken. 4 Japanese carriers versus 2 Americans had felt like a sure thing. Now, that certainty vanished. Just 27 days ago, Japanese pilots left the same ship, Yorktown, dead in the water, oil trailing behind her. Admiral Takagi had sent word to Tokyo, Yorktown-class carrier gone. The naval staff crossed her off their lists. But here she was, alive and kicking, her planes already clawing at the Japanese fleet. The intercom crackled with voices, confusion ripping through Hiryu. 3 carriers meant 230 American planes, not 150. 3 carriers meant the ambush, the careful trap, was suddenly backfiring. Suddenly, the Americans had flipped everything upside down. Imperial Navy intelligence had promised American repairs would take months. They'd staked the entire operation on it. But seeing Yorktown at Midway proved they had it all wrong. The Japanese believed real repairs needed careful hands, months of patience, a craftsman's touch, a carrier with a bomb hole torn through 5 decks, fuel tanks ruptured, compartments smashed, 90 days minimum in a proper yard. That was their math. Only 2 American carriers should have been in the Pacific, Enterprise and Hornet. Lexington was gone, lying on the bottom of the Coral Sea. Saratoga was still in pieces from a torpedo hit. The new Essex-class ships wouldn't be ready for another year. Japanese intelligence said so over and over, but intelligence and math didn't matter to the SBD dauntless dive bombers now screaming down toward Japanese decks. Nagumo's staff scrambled to recalculate, but one thing was clear. Operation MI was built on the idea that the Americans just couldn't do what they'd just done. Flashback to Coral Sea, May 8th, 1942, 500 miles northeast of Australia. The attack was textbook. 18 Type 99 dive bombers from Shokaku and Zuikaku found Yorktown slipping out of a rain squall. Lieutenant Commander Kikichi Takahashi led the strike, saw his pilots land a direct hit near the island. A 250-kilogram bomb punched through the flight deck, exploded 5 decks down. You could see the blast from 10,000 feet. Yorktown limped away, trailing a 10-meter oil slick, flames flickering through the holes in her hull. Japanese observers guessed she could only manage 6 knots. Planes returning to the carriers reported she was finished, so badly listing that no one could imagine her recovering. Photos showed destroyers moving in for rescue. Admiral Takagi Teo radioed to Fleet Command. 2 American carriers destroyed. Yorktown and Lexington eliminated. The Emperor heard the news. Planners at Kure scratched Yorktown from the battle order. For Midway, she didn't exist. But Captain Elliot Buckmaster, Yorktown skipper, had other ideas. His ship limped away at 20 knots, not 6. His damage control teams did the impossible. The bomb killed 66 men in a heartbeat, destroyed 6 compartments, wrecked elevator machinery, burst fuel tanks across 30 frames. By any normal rules, Yorktown needed months in dry dock, but she didn't get months. The journey home, May 8th to 27th, 1942. Coral Sea to Pearl Harbor, 3,300 miles. This was the first real look at American get-it-done thinking. Yes, Yorktown was battered, but her crew had a different mindset. Make it work. Make it fast. Get her back in the fight. Chief Carpenter Boyd McKenzie tossed the manuals aside. No waiting for perfect repairs. Instead of replacing damaged structural beams, a job for the dry dock, he welded steel plates over them. Ugly, sure, but they held. Machinery spaces told their own story. The bomb had wrecked the number 2 elevator and knocked out 3 boiler rooms. But the crew kept fighting, patching, making it work. Engineers got creative. They tore apart equipment in the ship's machine shop, pieced together new parts from scrap metal, and made do with whatever gear they could find, even if it was meant for something else. Yorktown, battered but stubborn, kept up 20 knots, way faster than anyone expected after the beating she'd taken. American subs kept Pearl Harbor in the loop, sending updates on her position. Japanese intelligence picked up the messages, sure, but they figured damaged ship meant she'd crawl along at 5 to 8 knots. Their math said Yorktown wouldn't limp back to Pearl Harbor until mid-June. No way she'd be ready for the fight at Midway. But then, May 27, 1942, just after lunch, Yorktown steamed into Pearl Harbor. The sight hit hard. From Diamond Head, you could see the 10-mile oil slick trailing behind her. She listed a port, smoke curling up from rough patchwork repairs. Rear Admiral Aubrey Fitch had already warned. Yorktown needed at least 90 days to get battle-ready. But this wasn't the old, sleepy Pearl Harbor. Not anymore. After the chaos of December 7th, the base had become a machine that measured time in hours, not months. They'd pulled off salvage jobs nobody thought possible. Admiral Chester Nimitz was waiting at the dock. He didn't keep his distance like the Japanese admirals, who stayed far behind the fighting. No, Nimitz was right there, wading through oily water as the dry dock filled. His pants soaked, hands blackened by grease. He turned to Captain Claude Gillette, the yard boss, and Lieutenant Commander H.J. Finstead, the hull expert. "We have to get this ship back in 3 days," he said. The words just hung there. Finstead finally swallowed and nodded. "Yes, sir." This 3-day deadline wasn't just some wild guess. In the basement of Building 1, just a few football fields from the dry dock, Station Hypo's codebreakers, led by Commander Joseph Rockefort, had cracked the Japanese naval code. They knew AF meant Midway. They knew the attack was coming June 4th. They even knew the Japanese order of battle. For carriers, most importantly, the Japanese thought Yorktown was finished. If she didn't make it, the Americans would go into battle outnumbered. For carriers, the two. With her, it'd be 3 against 4, a long shot, but at least a shot. May 28th, 5:30 a.m. The dock hadn't even drained all the way, water still swirling around their boots, when 1,400 workers scrambled aboard Yorktown. Welders, pipe fitters, electricians, machinists, you name it. Many of them had just finished all-nighters on other ships. Now they'd go another 72 hours straight. Forget careful planning. Forget red tape. Supervisors made calls on the spot. If you could help, you pitched in. The only rule was make or fight. Their methods would have horrified Japanese engineers. Take the bomb damage, for example. A 551-pounder had blasted through 5 decks. Japanese doctrine said you had to cut out all the ruined steel, build replacements, and restore every deck, at least a month's work. Pearl Harbor's answer? Leave the wreckage, weld giant steel plates right over it, and shore up the weak spots with wooden beams from construction sites. Done in 18 hours. Fuel tanks have been ruptured by near misses, tainting the fuel along 30 frames. Japanese procedure: drain, clean, inspect, and fix each tank. 2 weeks. Americans pumped out the bad fuel, patched leaks with runway cement, welded plates over everything, and sealed up any tanks they couldn't fix fast. 11 hours. Machinery took a beating. 2. 3 boiler rooms damaged, superheaters shot. Top speed now 27 knots instead of 32.5. Japanese standards call for full replacement. Pearl Harbor just shrugged, accepted slower speed, and made sure the basics worked. 14 hours. It wasn't pretty. Electrician Lewis Walters, just 21, remembered, "We didn't have time for proper repairs. We ran cables over the decks, not through the conduits. We welded plates over holes instead of replacing panels. Everything was temporary, ugly, but it worked." The numbers tell the story. 20 tons of steel plate welded on, 35 miles of electrical cable laid. For 100 tons of bad fuel pumped out, 3 wrecked compartments sealed tight. They drew so much power with the arc welders, they caused blackouts across Oahu. Workers ate while they welded. grabbed 15-minute naps leaning against the bulkheads, and just kept going. When welding sucked up so much electricity that even hospitals lost power, people on Oahu just rolled with the blackouts. Nobody complained. If the yard needed lumber, construction crews dropped it off. No paperwork, no fuss. Hull repairs tossed the rule book out the window. They jammed wood into busted seams, slapped steel plates on top, and welded it all together. One engineer called it a metal scab. Electrical repairs? Forget following any manual. Cables snaked all over, across decks, through hatches, up along the ceilings. May 30th, 1942. 9 in the morning. Yorktown left the harbor with shipyard workers still on board, tools in hand, still fixing things as she picked up speed. They jumped ship once she cleared the harbor. The air group on deck was a patchwork too. Bombing Squadron 3 came from Saratoga. Torpedo Squadron 3, just survivors from here and there, thrown together. Fighting Squadron 3, pilots from 3 different units, most of them strangers to each other. As Yorktown sailed out of Pearl Harbor, the workers who pulled off the impossible crowded the docks to watch. Chief Hull Technician Fingstag said later, "We sent her out looking like a fighter patched up between rounds. She wasn't pretty, but she could still throw punches." June 2nd, Point Luck, 325 miles northeast of Midway. Yorktown joined Enterprise and Hornet. The other crews couldn't believe their eyes. Commander W.D. McCluskey, Enterprise's air group leader, later wrote, "We knew Yorktown got hit at Coral Sea. We figured maybe she'd limp in as backup. Instead, she was launching planes, running operations, looking ready for a fight." Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, calling the shots from Yorktown, got it. Yorktown being there wasn't just more planes. It shattered every Japanese assumption. In his last briefing, Fletcher told his team, "The Japanese have planned every detail for facing 2 carriers. When they see our planes over their fleet, their certainty dies." Meanwhile, on the Japanese flagship Akagi, Admiral Nagumo Chuchi felt unshakable. He had 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Sōryū, Hiryu, with 248 planes, up against 2 American carriers with 150. Pearl Harbor veterans, facing Americans who'd never even won a carrier battle. Captain Minoru Genda, Nagumo's air ops officer, had war-gamed it all. Even if Americans caught them off guard, Japanese pilots and numbers would win. The only thing that could mess up that math? A 3rd American carrier. But intelligence said that was impossible. Yorktown was supposed to be dead. Commander Mitsuo Fukuda, Pearl Harbor strike leader, was laid up with appendicitis, but stuck around as an observer. Years later he wrote, "Our entire plan rested on intelligence that the Americans had 2 carriers. Not about 2, not maybe 3. Exactly 2. If we were wrong, everything was wrong." Then came June 4th. It all fell apart. For 30 a.m., Japanese carriers launched 108 planes at Midway. Everything was going by the book. Nagumo kept 108 planes in reserve, ready for the American fleet. The trap was set. 7:10 a.m., a Japanese scout plane spotted an American carrier. Just one, as expected. Nagumo ordered his reserve planes loaded with torpedoes for a ship attack. Then the reports got messy. Wait, 2 carriers? Still within the plan? Barely. 8:20 a.m., torpedo squadron from Hornet attacked. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron led 15 Devastators straight at the Japanese fleet, no fighter cover. All 15 were shot down. Only Ensign George Gay survived. But Waldron's sacrifice dragged the Japanese fighters down to sea level. 8:40 a.m., Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise tried next. 10 out of 14 Devastators shot down. No hits, but again, Japanese fighters stayed low. 9:15 a.m., 3 Devastators from Yorktown attacked. Then came the big reveal. As 12 more American torpedo planes made their runs, Japanese lookouts did a head count. Too many. The numbers didn't add up. 3 American carriers, not 2. On Hiryu's bridge, Admiral Yamaguchi did the math. Everything had changed. But before he could give new orders, before the Japanese could react, the American dive bombers arrived. 10:22 a.m., the turning point. Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie, leading Yorktown's bombing Squadron 3, had gotten lost but found the Japanese by tracking a destroyer's wake. His 17 Dauntless dive bombers showed up over the Japanese fleet at the exact same time as Enterprise's, just by chance. Yorktown's launch had been delayed by broken boilers. From 14,000 feet, Leslie looked down at 4 Japanese carriers, their decks packed with fueled and armed planes. Japanese fighters still hugging the waves. 6 minutes later, 3 Japanese carriers were burning. Sōryū took 3 direct hits from Leslie's squadron and went up in flames, a firestorm so bright you could see it from 50 miles away. The Japanese scrambled, attacking shadows and confusion. Admiral Yamaguchi, stuck with only Hiryu, faced 3 American carriers with just his last ship. Still, he didn't flinch. He threw everything he had, 18 dive bombers and 6 fighters, at Yorktown, the closest target. As they closed in, Lieutenant Emo Kobayashi, leading the strike, studied the American carrier through his binoculars. Something felt off. The island, the shape of the deck. This was Yorktown, the same ship they believed they'd sunk at Coral Sea. At 12:05 p.m., 3 bombs slammed into Yorktown. Fires broke out. Steam lines ruptured. The ship was dead in the water. For the second time in less than a month, Japanese pilots left Yorktown burning and figured she was finished. But Yorktown, even as she smoldered, had already changed everything. Her morning attack had sent Sōryū to the bottom, and by absorbing Hiryu's strike, she shielded Enterprise and Hornet, giving them a chance to launch the counterstrike that would finish off Hiryu 4 hours later. Yorktown's crew refused to give up. Captain Buckmaster ordered a quick damage check. The messy, desperate repairs from Pearl Harbor were holding. Welded plates stayed together. Chief Engineer John F. Delaney reported, "The Japanese bombs hurt us, but the Pearl Harbor repairs are solid. Give me 2 hours." In under an hour, the crew had 3 boilers running, fires under control, and counterflooding leveled out the list. By 1:40 p.m., Yorktown was back up to 19 knots, refueling fighters. She looked so good that when Hiryu's second wave arrived at 2:30 p.m., the Japanese thought they'd found a different, untouched carrier. The confusion only got worse. At 2:30 p.m., Lieutenant Tomonagajo led 5 torpedo bombers, everything Hiryu had left, expecting to see a wreck. Instead, he found a carrier underway, launching fighters. His radio report baffled Japanese command. They started to believe maybe 4 American carriers were out there. Tomonaga's torpedoes in the end doomed Yorktown, but the confusion bought time, and before the Japanese could organize a real response, Enterprise's dive bombers caught Hiryu at 5 p.m. and finished her. Then came the last act. June 6, 1:31 p.m., Japanese submarine I-168, under Lieutenant Commander Yahachi Tanabe, found Yorktown being towed. Tanabe fired 4 torpedoes. 2 struck Yorktown. Another hit the destroyer Hammond alongside. Yorktown rolled over on June 7th. Tanabe logged the sinking as probably Saratoga. Even in death, Yorktown left the enemy guessing. The Japanese never realized the carrier at Midway was the same one they thought they'd sunk at Coral Sea. The numbers tell the story. Japanese estimates. Repairs like Yorktown's would take them 90 to 120 days. American peacetime standards, 30 to 45 days. Actual time needed, 72 hours. 1,400 workers, round the clock. Yorktown was back to 85% combat effectiveness. The Japanese thought 4 carriers versus 2 meant certain victory. Reality? 4 against 3 was a fair fight. The result? 4 Japanese carriers lost, 1 American. Yorktown's impact was huge. Her planes sank Sōryū. She took 2 Japanese strikes that would have hit Enterprise or Hornet. 75 Japanese aircraft lost attacking her. The Japanese offensive died right there. Years later, those who were there remembered what Yorktown meant. Commander Mitsuo Fukuda, Japanese, "The appearance of 3rd carrier shattered our planning. Every scenario assumed 2. When lookouts reported more torpedo planes and 2 carriers could launch, we knew something was terribly wrong. By the time we understood, 3 carriers were burning." Aviation machinist Tom Cheek, USS Enterprise. "When we saw Yorktown at Point Luck, Grown men actually cheered. We knew she'd been hurt bad at Coral Sea, but there she was, patched like a prize fighter, ready for another round. Electrician Wayne Morrison, Pearl Harbor. When we heard she'd helped sink 3 Japanese carriers before taking hits, the whole yard went quiet. Then someone started clapping. Soon 10,000 workers were applauding. Those 3 days meant something. The Japanese slowly pieced together what had happened, but it took years to fully understand. Admiral Mato Magaki, Yamamoto's chief of staff, wrote, "The appearance of Yorktown at Midway was not luck. It was preparation. Somehow the Americans knew our plans. The 3-day repair was not a miracle. It was a response to intelligence." In 1962, Lieutenant Commander Tanabe visited Pearl Harbor. They showed him dry dock number 1, where Yorktown had been repaired. He stood there, silent for minutes, and finally said, "Now I understand. We weren't fighting a nation. We were fighting an idea, that anything is possible if you work hard enough. We believed in spirit over matter. Americans believed in matter properly applied." Admiral Shigeru Fukudome would later reflect on all this. 2. Yorktown's legacy lived on long after the battle ended. Yorktown showed us the war was lost before it ever really started. Any country that could patch up a battered ship in 3 days would always beat a country that needed 3 months. Simple math. The way Yorktown got fixed up said everything about the difference between Japanese and American thinking. The Japanese chased perfection, craftsmanship, honor in the details. If a ship got hit, they believed you had to restore it completely, no matter how long it took. Quality first, time second. Americans looked at it differently. Get it working, get it moving, adapt to whatever you've got. Ships didn't need to look pretty. They needed to fight. Time was the real enemy. This mindset went way past ship repair. Japan built gorgeous planes. Every boat and seemed just so. Every craft a masterpiece. The U.S. pumped out good enough planes by the thousands. Swap out any part. Fix it with whatever's on hand. Get it flying again. Intelligence played its part too. Station Hypo's codebreakers made fixing Yorktown urgent. But the shipyard crew made the codebreakers work matter. Without Yorktown patched up and ready, Admirals Nimitz and Fletcher probably wouldn't have rolled the dice at Midway. With her, the odds made sense. Commander Rockefort nailed it. We could read their mail, but reading meant nothing if we couldn't act. Yorktown let us act. Those shipyard workers mattered as much as the guys cracking codes. Yorktown's repair changed everything. After that, the Navy didn't chase perfect repairs. They chased speed. The doctrine flipped. Function over form. Innovation over strict procedure. The Yorktown Standard appeared. Save any ship that floats, no matter how rough she looks. That repair job also showed the world what American industry could do. Those 1,400 workers who fixed Yorktown in 72 hours were the same kind of folks who'd later build Liberty ships in 4 days, crank out B-24s every hour, and finish the atomic bomb in 3 years. Years later, in 1985, some of the guys who fixed Yorktown met up with the sailors who fought on her. Lewis Walters, the electrician who strung power cables for 3 days straight, met Tom Lee, a gunner whose life depended on those cables. "Your wiring saved my life," Lee told him. "When the first bomb hit and the lights went out, your backup lines kept my guns firing." Walters just said, "We knew boys would depend on our work. Every weld, every patch, we pictured someone's son needing it." Admiral Nimitz put it best after the war. Those 3 days in dry dock might have been the most important days of the whole Pacific campaign, not just because of the repair, but because of what it meant. America mobilized. Workers showed up. Industry roared to life. The Japanese thought they'd fight a slow, soft, divided America. At Midway, they met the real thing, fast, tough, united. Yorktown proved it. The ship they thought they'd sunk showed up whole. Japanese pilots saw her planes overhead and realized they weren't just fighting aircraft. They were fighting American determination. They saw the future. American strength, human grit, industrial muscle. The repair crew didn't just fix a ship. They showed what kind of country they came from. In those 3 days, the workers at Pearl Harbor proved impossible just means not done yet. The numbers tell the story. 72 hours. 1,400 workers. Over $2 million in materials. 3 days pulled from other projects. The result? Yorktown's plane sank a Japanese carrier. She took 2 major hits and survived. 322 enemy planes shot down. Over 3,500 Japanese personnel lost. Japan's offensive in the Pacific finished. American repair speed blew away Japanese expectations. Rapid repair became the rule, not the exception. American industry kicked into high gear. But the Japanese kept wondering, how did the Americans know to repair Yorktown so fast? How did they know Midway would happen on June 4th? The truth, that U.S. codebreakers were reading their messages live, would stay secret for decades. Still, even without knowing that Yorktown's appearance at the exact right moment should have told them everything, the Americans knew their plans inside and out. Even today, the Navy teaches the Yorktown lesson. Speed beats perfection. Adaptation beats rigid plans. The enemy won't wait for you to get everything just right. Every sailor learns about those 72 hours in dry dock. Every damage control man knows the Yorktown standard. Captain Buckmaster, Yorktown skipper, summed it up best. The Japanese expected us to play by the old rules. There were rules about how long repairs should take, sure, but we're Americans. We don't just follow rules. We make them up as we go. Our rule that week was simple. Yorktown fights at Midway. The workers at Pearl Harbor didn't pull off some miracle. They did what Americans do best. They got messy. They improvised. They made mistakes, but they didn't stop. They fixed my ship however they could. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't by the book, but it was ready. When we left port on May 30th, Yorktown wasn't the same ship that limped in after Coral Sea. She was something new. Part old, part patchwork, all grit. She looked like America itself, battered, taped together, but unbroken and ready for a fight. The Japanese at Midway didn't just run into 3 carriers. They ran into American stubbornness, hammered into steel. And it all started with 72 wild, frantic hours in dry dock, when impossible got thrown out the window. Here's the bottom line. Today, Yorktown rests 16,650 feet down, right where Robert Ballard found her in 1998. She's upright, battle scars and all. You can still see the rush repairs, the welded plates, the ugly patches. They got her to Midway. At Pearl Harbor, there's a plaque by Dry Dock Number 1. Here, in 72 hours, American workers performed the impossible, repairing USS Yorktown for the Battle of Midway. Their labor changed history. The Japanese woke a sleeping giant at Pearl Harbor. At Midway, they found out what happens when that giant wakes up all the way. Fix the unfixable. Do the unthinkable. Show up when no one expects. Lieutenant Commander Tanabe, who landed the fatal blow on Yorktown, figured out too late. He thought he was fighting ships and planes. In truth, he was up against an idea that nothing's impossible for people who refuse to accept it. The folks who pulled off the Yorktown miracle didn't get medals. Nobody hands out awards for welding or cable laying. No headlines for patching holes. They just went back to work, fixing the next ship, winning the war one repair at a time. But those 72 hours changed everything. They showed the world. If America can fix a carrier in 3 days, America can do anything. Sending a patched-up Yorktown to Midway was more than just a tactical trick. It was a message. American industry wasn't just about churning out stuff. It was about willpower, innovation, refusing to take no for an answer. Yorktown's sudden reappearance wasn't just a surprise attack. It was proof that the real strength of democracy isn't in bombs or bullets. It's in the worker with a welding torch and a deadline. And they did it. Yorktown's comeback is living proof of what free people can pull off when they work together. In 72 hours, those workers didn't just fix a ship. They showed that determination and ingenuity beat any obstacle, that getting the job done matters more than doing it perfectly, that tomorrow's fight matters more than yesterday's rulebook. The Japanese commanders, shocked to see Yorktown at Midway, didn't just see a repaired ship. They saw the future. A world where democracy outworks aristocracy, where problem solvers beat rule followers, where people who choose to give everything went out over those forced to obey. Yorktown sank on June 7, 1942, but what she stood for didn't sink. It rose up and changed the rest of the war. Every fast fix, every impossible deadline met, every new solution that came from necessity, not instructions. All of it traces back to those 3 days in May, when 1,400 Americans proved that impossible is just the place you start. The phantom that haunted Japanese pilots at Midway wasn't a ghost. It was something stronger. It was proof that a free nation, working together, can do anything. Those workers didn't know they were making history. They just knew they had a job to do, and 3 days to do it. In those days, they didn't just fix a carrier. They proved a point that would carry America through the war and beyond. Free people, united by a common goal, can make the impossible real. That idea, welded into Yorktown's hull, helped turn the tide at Midway. And it's still America's secret weapon. Not fancy tech or endless resources, but the simple belief that any problem can be solved if you work hard enough, smart enough, and fast enough. The Japanese didn't get it until it was too late. They measured time in months. Americans measured in hours. They chased perfection. We chased victory. They followed the manual. We followed whatever it took. In the end, 3 days in a dry dock determined the fate of the Pacific. 3 days that proved the arsenal of democracy's greatest weapon was neither arsenal nor democracy alone, but the combination of both. Free workers choosing to do the impossible and then doing it.